Little Johnny and two other boys are at confession. The priest asks the first boy,
"What sin did you commit?"
The boy replies,
"I stole some candy from the store."
The priest responds,
"Drink this holy water and your sin will be forgiven."
So the boy drinks the water and stands to the side. The priest then asks the second boy,
"What sin did you commit?"
The boy replies,
"I cheated on my exam."
The priest responds,
"Drink this holy water and your sin will be forgiven."
The boy drinks the water and stands to the side. The priest looks over at little Johnny, who seems very nervous at this point. The priest says,
"Why are you so nervous, Johnny? What sin did you commit?"
Little Johnny stammers,
Well, you see, Father, I peed in the holy water."
An Irishman's been drinking at a pub all night. When he stands up to leave, he falls flat on his face. He tries to stand one more time, but to no avail. Again, he falls flat on his face. He figures he'll crawl outside and get some fresh air, and maybe that'll sober him up. Once outside, he stands up, and sure enough, he falls flat on his face. So, the Irishman decides to crawl the 4 blocks to his home. When he arrives at the door, he stands up and falls flat on his face. He crawls through the door into his bedroom. When he reaches his bed, he tries one more time to stand up. This time, he manages to pull himself upright, but he quickly falls right into bed. He is sound asleep as soon as his head hits the pillow. He awakens the next morning to his wife standing over him shouting,
"So you've been out drinking again?"
"Why you say that?" he asks innocently. His wife replies,
"The pub cold. You left your wheelchair there again."
When Bob and Steve met each other on the street one day, Bob noticed that Steve had a terrible cold. "Have you seen a doctor about that cold?" he asked.
"No,"
said Steve,
"but I probably should."
"Do you know a good doctor?" Bob gave him the name of his own doctor and assured him that he'd be in good hands. About a week later, they met again, and Bob wasn't sure if the cold was really better. "Did you see my doctor?" asked Bob.
"Oh, yeah,"
Steve replied.
"He was a really nice guy."
"Well, did he give you something to help your cold?"
"Sure did."
Steve answered somewhat enthusiastically.
"He told me to drink a big glass of fresh orange juice after a hot bath."
"Well, did it help?" Bob asked hesitantly.
"How do I know?"
Steve replied.
"I haven't finished drinking the bath yet."
Dave and Joe are bungee jumping one day. Dave turns to Joe and says,
"You know, I bet we could make a ton of money running our own bungee jumping business in Mexico."
Joe thinks this is a great idea, so they pool their money together, buy everything they need, and head for Mexico. When they arrive, they begin setting up the equipment on a bridge while a curious crowd gathers below and watches. Slowly, more and more people gather to watch them work. When they finish, there is such a large crowd, they think it would be a good idea to give a demonstration. So, Dave positions himself at the edge of the bridge and jumps. The cord is so strong that Dave bounces all the way back up to the bridge. Joe is amazed but notices that Dave has a bloody lip. Joe unsuccessfully tries to catch him but fails, and Dave falls, then bounces back up again. This time, Dave's head is bruised and bleeding. Again, Joe misses him, and Dave falls and bounces back up to the bridge. This time, Dave looks battered and is almost unconscious. Luckily, Joe catches him this time and asks, "What happened? Was the cord too long? Did you hit the ground?" Barely able to speak, Dave gasps,
"No, the bungee cord is fine, but..." "What the heck is a piñata?"
After 30 years of marriage, a husband and wife go for counseling. When asked what the problem is, the wife goes into a tirade listing every problem they have ever had in the years that they've been married. On and on she goes. Neglect, lack of intimacy, emptiness, loneliness, feeling unloved and unlovable. An entire laundry list of the unmet needs that she's endured. Finally, after allowing this for a sufficient length of time, the therapist gets up, walks around the desk, asks the wife to stand, and kisses her long and passionately, as her husband watches with a raised eyebrow. The woman shuts up and quietly sits down as though in a daze. The therapist turns to the husband and says,
"This is what your wife needs at least 3 times a week. Can you do this?"
Well, of course I can,
the husband replies.
I'll bring her by Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Several centuries ago, the Pope decreed that all the Jews had to convert to Catholicism or leave Italy. There was a huge outcry from the Jewish community, so the Pope offered a deal. He'd have a religious debate with the leader of the Jewish community. If the Jews won, they could stay in Italy. If the Pope won, they'd have to convert or leave. The Jewish people met, and they picked an aged and wise rabbi to represent them in the debate. However, as the rabbi spoke no Italian, and the Pope spoke no Hebrew, they agreed that it would be a silent debate. On the chosen day, the Pope and the rabbi sat opposite each other. The Pope raised his hand and showed 3 fingers. The rabbi looked back and raised 1 finger. Next, the Pope waved his finger around his head. The rabbi pointed to the ground where he sat. The Pope brought out a communion wafer and a chalice of wine. The rabbi pulled out an apple. With that, the Pope stood up and declared himself beaten and said that the rabbi was too clever. The Jews could stay in Italy. Later, the cardinals met with the Pope and asked him what had happened. The Pope said,
"First I held up 3 fingers to represent the Trinity. He responded by holding up a single finger to remind me there is still only one God common to both our beliefs. Then I waved my finger around my head to show him that God was all around us. He responded by pointing to the ground to show that God was also right here with us. Finally, I pulled out the wine and wafer to show that God absolves us of all our sins. He pulled out an apple to remind me of the original sin. He bested me at every move, and I could not continue."
Meanwhile, the Jewish community gathered to ask the rabbi how he had won.
I don't have a clue,
The rabbi said.
First, he told me that we had 3 days to get out of Italy, so I gave him the finger. Then he tells me that the whole country would be cleared of Jews, so I told him that we were staying right here.
"And then what?"
asked a woman.
Who knows?
Shrugged the rabbi.
He took out his lunch, so I took out mine.